Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and ABC News contributor Colonel Steve Ganyard. So what was your initial reaction when you heard that President Biden would be visiting Saudi Arabia?
Kara, that there would be a crow on the menu when he arrived, because he's going to have to walk back some of the primary plank of what he ran on as a candidate. Candidate Biden came into office with a values-based national security and international relations policies, and because of world events and the price of oil and Ukraine and China and Russia, he has gone back to national interest, and oftentimes national interest will trump national values.
So, okay, then let's talk more about that. Biden has been really outspoken with regard to this murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, allegedly carried out by Saudi. So, and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. But today, he fist bumps him. and so he's talking out of two sides of his mouth, according to critics. So how is this going to be perceived around the world, and how do you see this?
Yeah, I mean, being president is tough. Doesn't matter what party you are. Sometimes you have to say two things. You may believe one, but you may have to say the other. I would say that the fist bump was a triumph. It was about the best that they could have expected, given how low the relationship is. Kara, this is probably the worst relationship that the two countries have had in almost 50 years. So if we're going to put a positive spin on this, the fact that the president went to Saudi Arabia sort of swallowed his pride and said the most important thing is to get the global economy back on track to bring down the price of gas in the U.S. and around the world. And to do that, we need OPEC to pump extra gas, and the Saudis are the ones who can lead that. So the fact that they actually had a meeting, that we cut to a fist bump, that's progress, because we're working from a very, very low place.
So how do you find a balance here and this relationship between the U.S. and Saudi? Biden says it's very important. He wants to change the dynamic here, but at the same time, we're covering the human rights abuses, and we're covering allegations of, taking out activists for human rights.
Yeah, I mean, these are the dilemmas that diplomats face all the time, where you have to say something that in the U.S., where you say this is horrible, where you kill a journalist, you assassinate a journalist. But on the other hand, the Saudis and other countries like the Saudis, sometimes you just have to hold your nose. They are a very, very powerful country. They are still sort of the swing producer, along with the United States, in terms of producing hydrocarbons. And right now, the world desperately needs that. The sanctions that have been imposed on Russia are upsetting the whole global economy in terms of energy. One of the ironies here is that the Saudis are buying Russian oil at a discount and using it to power their power plants this summer, while selling their own oil at market rates. So they're making out on the whole deal. So that's a little bit of extra salt in the wound for the president here. But it's just one of these things where the president has had to come back to Saudi Arabia and say, look, the most important thing right now is to bring down inflation, to bring down the cost of things like gas that people are killing people's pocketbooks in the United States. So at some point, we can get back to more of a values-based national security policy. But at this point, the price of oil is what's driving his poll numbers and what he is trying to address in this trip.
Do you think that he can get what he wants?
No, he won't. He won't get anything from the Saudis. The Saudis, after being called pariahs and the president not accepting MBS's phone calls, are not going to give him any prizes coming out of this visit. The best that the president can hope for is that the Saudis will go into the August 3rd meeting of OPEC and say, look, we need to bump up the production in all of our countries to try and put more oil on the global markets, and bring down the price of gas. The problem, Kara, is twofold. One is that most of these countries like pumping gas at this price because they're making gobs of money. The other is that none of these countries really have spare capacity. So even if these countries begin to increase the tap, increase the flow of oil on global markets, it's going to take a long time to take effect, and it may not show up at the pump, at least in the U.S., as more change of, say, a few pennies.
So why go? Why make the trip? Doesn't sound like he's going to get anything in return.
You're right, but as I said, sometimes you just have to say we're going to start from the base and we're going to start from the bottom, and we can't have a relationship that's this bad when oil and hydrocarbons still drive global markets. This president came into office with very high hopes, which we've seen dashed again in the past day or two, for a green energy policy that will move the U.S. very quickly away from hydrocarbons. That is easier said than done, and in this case, given the global turmoil that's being caused by the war in Ukraine, by global markets, by sanctioning Russian oil, it just makes it very difficult for the president to stand on these high values when the people in the United States are hurting. And here's another fact here. In the U.S., we've seen a doubling in the price of our gas at the pump. In most of the rest of the world, they've seen 5 to 7 times an increase in the price of gas. I mean, think about that in the U.S. and how President Biden's poll numbers would look if we were paying, say, $20 a gallon at the pump. But that's what most of the rest of the world is suffering. And
That's
the
crazy.
U.S. cannot have the rest of the world, the economy collapse, because that's ultimately bad for the U.S. as well.
Well, that's what would happen if people had to pay $20 for gas. I can't even imagine how that would impact our country. It'd be disastrous. All right, so while the president throws a Hail Mary there in Saudi, let's talk about his trip to Israel and his reception there. He talked about a two-state solution, but is there really going to be any movement on that at all?
I think we need to have the Israel trip put in perspective, Kira. The Israel trip, in many ways, was a cover for the Saudi trip. The only thing the president had to do was get to the Saudis and say, please, can you think about pumping more oil, you and your OPEC friends. So nobody in Israel believed that we were going to move towards a two-state solution. The stake was put in the heart during his visit. Nobody in Israel was particularly happy to see the president. There's no way that with King Salman still alive that MBS can move closer to Israel. So everybody knows that he wasn't going to make progress. So he went on the premise that, hey, we're going to try to move the peace agenda forward, knowing full well that wasn't the reason he was going to Saudi Arabia or the reason he was going to Israel. He needs to get the price of oil down, and having to go and to begin to repair the relationship with Saudi Arabia is that painful first step that we're seeing today.
Colonel Steve Ganyard, always good to see you, Steve.
Thanks, Kira.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.